All right, hey y'all, we are live inside the DC newsroom here, Fox 5 DC, for our Fox 5 Live program here on this Wednesday, March 28th. Welcome to the show, and thanks for hanging out with me today. If you're on with us, you know we like to jump around to all of the breaking videos, anything live that's coming in, anything that's of interest, top stories of the day, social media topics, trending topics, whatever we got. Show you a wider view of our newsroom here. You can see my trusty sidekick, my large smart food cheddar popcorn that I am not messing around with today. But anyway, without further ado, let's go right over to Minneapolis. Vice President Pence is speaking right now on tax reform. Taxes, of course, hot topic of the year. We've been talking about it. How is it going to affect us in this coming year, in the next year when we do our taxes? It's not even really the ultimate day of tax season yet for us this year, but things are changing and things are coming. So let's hear what the Vice President has to say in Minnesota about tax cuts. We're also going to be flashing to Austin, Texas. Some of the lawmakers there are talking about the new proposed census question for the 2020 census regarding citizenship. That has been a hot topic talker for a few days now. So let's go over to where Vice President is. This is live, just coming into us now.
Heroes and all of you gathered here today, President Trump promised to rebuild our military and restore the arsenal of democracy. And 5 days ago, he did just that when he signed the largest investment in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. In fact, the Commander-in-Chief just gave our troops the biggest pay raise in nearly 10 years. And under President Trump, the era of budget cuts of our armed forces is over. Our president has also pledged. He's also pledged to stand with those who served in the uniform of the United States. If you're able to stand, would you mind, if you've served in one of the armed forces of this country, would you just mind standing on your feet and giving us one more chance to say thank you for your service? Thank you for your service. President Trump and I have been working hard with these great leaders in the Congress to make sure that we give our veterans access to the world-class health care that they earned in the uniform of the United States of America, and we're doing just that. President Trump also promised to stand with the men and women who serve on the thin blue line of law enforcement, and I'm proud to report to you that we are once again we're giving the men and women in law enforcement the resources and the respect that they earn and deserve as they protect our families every day. Our president promised to secure our borders, enforce our laws for the citizens of this country, and I'm pleased to report to you illegal crossings at our southern border have been cut by nearly 50%. And just last week, President Trump signed into law $1.6 billion of border wall funding that will provide nearly 100 miles of border wall. And when it comes to the wall, make no mistake about it, we're going to build it all. Our president also promised to appoint strong conservatives to our federal courts at every level. We've been busy doing just that. The president appointed Justice Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court of the United States. And last year, he set a record for the most Court of Appeal judges confirmed in a single year for any administration in American history. And they're conservatives all. Closer to home, you know, the president promised to do more than has ever been done to combat the scourge of opiate addiction that's ravaging families here in Minnesota and all across the country. You know, when I was governor of Indiana, I saw the impact of opiate addiction firsthand. I sat in the kitchen with families still grieving the loss of a loved one. I sat with recovering addicts and heard about the stranglehold of addiction on their lives that they'd only recently broken free from. I'm proud to report to you, thanks to the President's leadership, the strong support of these leaders in Congress, we're on track to partner with states and law enforcement as never before to invest nearly $6 billion to combat opiate addiction. And working with these leaders in Congress, we will make this the generation that ends the opiate crisis in America. And finally, in the wake of deadly shootings across our country, our president promised after Parkland, Florida, that this time America would take action. And last week, the president took decisive action to improve school safety when he signed legislation to strengthen background checks and give parents and schools and law enforcement new tools and new resources to keep our kids safe. Because no child should ever be in danger in an American school, and we will continue to make school safety the top national priority of this administration. So, as I report to you what we've done together, I'm telling you, in this White House, it's been about renewed American strength. It's about security. It's about safety in our communities, in our schools. But what brings us here today is it's also about restoring growth and prosperity for the American people. And since day one of this administration, this president's been keeping his promises to rev the engine of the American economy, and it's working. The president promised to roll back the heavy hand of government. Some of you may remember back on the campaign trail, the president promised to repeal 2 federal regulations for every new federal rule put on the books. And to be perfectly honest with you, we didn't do that. Working with Congressman Paulson, Lewis, Emmer, we actually have repealed 22 federal regulations for every new rule put on the federal code, including when we repealed the disastrous Waters of the USA rule. We promised to unleash American energy. And early on in this administration, we approved the Keystone and Dakota pipelines. We rolled back the Clean Power Plan, and President Trump put America first when he withdrew the United States from the job-killing Paris Climate Accord. The president also promised to rebuild American infrastructure. If you haven't noticed, you elected a builder to be president of the United States. And just last week, we got a down payment with the support of these members of Congress, $21 billion for our plan to give Minnesota and America the best roads and bridges and best future we've ever had. But in the midst of it all, the president's been working to put America first. I'm pleased to report to you, this president's been fighting every day for free and fair and reciprocal trade. He's been holding our trading partners accountable for agreements. We've been renegotiating deals. I'm pleased to report to you we're making great progress on NAFTA, and just yesterday the White House announced we have reached an agreement in principle on a renegotiated free trade agreement with South Korea that will put American jobs and American workers first. And finally, what brings us here today, our president on that campaign trail promised to cut taxes across the board for working families, businesses large and small, in the city and on the farm. And just more than 3 months ago, with the strong support of these leaders in the Congress, President Donald Trump signed the largest tax cuts and tax reform in American history. That's promises made and promises kept. It's amazing to think we're just 1 year into this administration, and frankly, for all that I've just reported to you, all the progress that we've made together with the strong support of these members of Congress you've heard from today and heard about today, the results have been nothing short of remarkable. Since Election Day, American businesses have actually created nearly 3 million new jobs, including more than 22,000 new jobs in the Twin Cities area alone. The unemployment rate in this country hasn't been this low in 17 years, and in 2017, unemployment in the Minneapolis area fell by nearly 20%. And while Minnesota, get this, while Minnesota lost over 1,000 manufacturing jobs in the last year of the previous administration, under President Trump, Minnesota's factories have bounced back, are booming once again, and since Election Day, businesses across this state have created 7,600 new, good-paying manufacturing and construction jobs all across this state. It's just 14 months. I mean, the truth is, with rolling back regulation, with making the right investments in a growing American economy, with cutting taxes for working families and businesses, bottom line, growth is back, confidence is back. Under President Donald Trump, America is back, and we're just getting started. You know, I work with him every day, and I can tell you, for all I just reported to you, that's what this president calls a good start. He is relentless. And the truth is, we believe the best days for American growth are yet to come, because the truth is, most of the tax cuts are just starting to make a difference. I mean, we cut taxes for Minnesota's working families so you keep more of your hard-earned money. We cut taxes for Minnesota's businesses, so businesses in this state can now compete and win against businesses anywhere in the world with a lower tax rate. If you didn't notice it, we also cut out the cornerstone of Obamacare. The individual mandate is gone. It's off the books. You know, when you add it all together, all told, we think these tax cuts will save the typical family of four here in Minnesota about $3,000 a year in your taxes. And we think they'll unlock new opportunities for businesses to reward employees with higher wages, bigger bonuses, and better benefits. The truth is, they already are. In fact, we think once all our tax cuts go into effect, that workers here in Minnesota are going to see raises of more than $4,500 a year in the years ahead. Amazing. And you know, we're already on our way, because in just the past 3 months, thousands of Minnesota workers have seen bonuses as high as $2,000. And folks, that's great news for working families. But not everybody thinks that. I mean, you might have heard that the person that wants to be the Speaker of the House again, Nancy Pelosi, when she heard about families getting $1,000 at the end of last year after the president signed those tax cuts, she actually said a $1,000 bonus for working families was nothing more than crumbs. Did you hear that? Now, let me remind all of you that, Karen and I come from the Joseph A. Bank wing of the West Wing. You with me on that? Okay. I mean, really, we've lived on a budget our whole lives. And when our kids were little, we had a term for another $1,000 in the paycheck at the end of the year. Christmas. Am I right? I mean, the truth is, these bonuses and the pay raises that are already happening all across Minnesota are making a real difference in the lives of families in the Twin Cities and all across this state. And I want to say very seriously, any leader who says that $1,000 in the pockets of working families is crumbs is out of touch with the American people. Okay? So let me take a moment to thank some leaders that are in touch with the people of Minnesota. These are great leaders in Congress. I mentioned them before, but I got to mention it again because they were champions of everything that I just described, most especially those tax cuts. Congressman Eric Paulson Congressman Jason Lewis and Congressman Tom Emmer have been standing with this administration every step of the way. They've been putting America first, and they've been putting Minnesota first. And everything I just described happened because of their leadership and support. They helped rebuild our military. They helped roll back the reams of federal red tape that I talked about. And they passed these historic tax cuts that are making a difference here in Minnesota. And I know you are as grateful as the President and I are for these extraordinary leaders. You know, but President Trump and I know, for all of the strong leaders that we work with every day in Washington, D.C., we know that the real strength of this country is not to be found in our nation's capital. The real strength of this country is not found in the marble halls of government. That really, the strength and the greatness of this nation has always been found in the hearts and in the character, in the faith, in the work ethic and the resilience of the American people. And Minnesota is proof of that every single day. I mean, the hardworking people of Minnesota have always embodied the American spirit. From the pioneers who carved a home out of the wilderness to the patriots who were the first to volunteer to fight for freedom in our nation's Civil War, to the innovators of every new generation who carry this great state onward and upward. Minnesota has long been and is today America's star of the North. And that star is helping to lead our nation to a better and brighter future. Today, Minnesota's at the forefront of a great American comeback. You really are. But folks, that comeback has only just begun. And I came here today not just to say thanks, not just to give you a report, but also to tell you that we need your continued support to move the president's agenda forward. So as I close, let me say I'm very humbled that you take time to come out today to see me. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being out.
Thank you.
It's, I mean, you know, I'm just a small town boy from southern Indiana, and I dreamed one day of maybe representing my hometown in the Congress. I had the opportunity to serve my state as governor, but I never imagined this grandson of an immigrant would have the opportunity to stand before you as Vice President of the United States of America. And I thank you for your support. And thank you. I want to encourage you today, before we leave, to take what you've heard here today. Keep doing what you did when you made the decision to come out on a Wednesday afternoon or morning. Stay engaged as citizens. Take the energy that, frankly, I've seen in this room this morning, and carry that out from here. Because the truth is that we've got our work cut out for us in the days ahead to continue to move this agenda forward. I mean, in every real sense, I encourage you to let your voice be heard. You know, I'll always believe that, you know, all the cable television networks in the world, all the internet websites in the world, all the mail pieces and TV commercials, don't matter a hill of beans when somebody who knows you and trusts you hears from you about how important it is to support this president, support this agenda, and support the people that are working with us every day. So go tell somebody. Leave here and tell somebody. I mean, reach out to coworkers and neighbors, friends at your place of work, places of worship. I mean, I truly do believe that word of mouth is now and will always be the most powerful medium in America. So I just encourage you to go out and tell somebody what you heard. I mean, say, I ran into Mike the other day. And he was telling me all the stuff we've gotten done. And not what the president's gotten done, and not what the Republican majorities in the Congress, what we have gotten done together. I mean, the people who are gathered in this room, people all across Minnesota and across America, stood with this president, stood with these great leaders, and gave us a government that could, in every real sense, turn this country back in the direction of what's always made this country safe and prosperous and strong. So go tell the story of what's happening in America among your families and your friends and your loved ones. Tell them, you know, what they're not hearing on most of their cable television networks. Tell them about these great congressional leaders, how important it is that we see them continue to have the opportunity to serve and to lead. Tell them what we've accomplished, and tell them about the difference that it's making here in Minnesota and all across the country. I mean, tell them we cut their taxes so they can keep more of what they earn. Tell them we're restoring American strength at home and abroad, standing with our allies, standing up to our enemies. And tell them we're once again taking the steps necessary to protect our families in new and in renewed ways. In a word, tell them we're putting Washington back to work for them, not the other way around. Tell them President Donald Trump, under this administration, the forgotten men and women of America are forgotten no more. You go tell them that when you leave here today. It is true. Tell them that. It's true. And there's one more thing I might encourage you to do if you're of a mind. In these challenging times, where there seems to be widening threats abroad and too much division here at home, if you're inclined from time to time to bow the head and bend the knee and pray for America, I encourage you to do it. I truly do. And when you pray, I'm not so much saying pray for a cause or pray for any particular candidate or party. I'm just saying pray for America, because America matters far beyond our shores, the last best hope of earth. And pray for this great nation, all of its people, and all those who serve her every day. I truly do believe if you continue to do that, if you continue to support this agenda going forward with your time and your voice and in every way as good citizens, with these great leaders in the Congress that we've talked about today, with President Donald Trump in the White House, and with God's help, I know we will make America prosperous again. We will make America safe again. And to borrow a phrase, we will make America great again. Thank you very much, Minnesota. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America.
All right, guys, so that was Vice President Pence in Minneapolis, live in Minneapolis, talking about tax reform. I want to take you now over to some live video that's coming in. Check this out, guys. A live look at a hot air balloon crash in the Phoenix, Arizona area. You can see there the hot air balloon on the ground, fire truck responding. Once we get the wide picture of this, you'll see it a little bit more. Seems to be there are rescue operations there on the ground attempting to kind of help the victims of this scene. I don't quite see anyone in dire need of emergency services. You can see a lot of people kind of gathering around and watching this scene. Unfortunately, no reporter sound on this, so we don't have a lot of more details to bring you, but we do know this is the Phoenix, Arizona area, and something you don't really hear about a lot, right? A hot air balloon crash, necessarily. Maybe we just don't really get them in as often, but this is a live look at that going on. You can see a bunch of bystanders there. Hopefully some of those people who were in it, if they were occupying that cabin, are okay, and possibly that they are there among the crowd and not injured, but we don't quite know right now what is the scenario here with by way of injuries. But there you go, you can see the fire truck there, fire personnel working to put out some sort of thing. They have their hoses in hand and they are working at the scene. So that's what we know of that. If we find out any more information on that, we'll bring that to you live. For now, guys, back in the newsroom, let's go over to Austin, Texas. This morning, lawmakers in Austin were discussing the recent announcement of adding that citizenship question to the 2020 census. It's been on people's minds now. We've been talking about it, how it will affect larger cities who have larger immigrant populations by way of funding, and what will happen kind of to these larger cities for that, for voting and all that stuff. So district lines. Let's listen into some of the lawmakers in Texas, see what they had to say about it. They responded to this possibility that this question will be on the census, something that hasn't happened since 1950. Here's what they had to say.
Morning, on a very important topic that we'd like to discuss today. But first, I'd like to briefly recognize the organizations and our partners and advocates that are here joining us today this morning. First, we have State Representative Mary Gonzalez, who's the Vice Chair of the Mexican American Legislative Caucus. We also have Selena Moreno representing MALDEF, Jose Carrillo from NALEO, and Ann Beeson from the CCCP, and Jessica Azua from Texas Organizing Project. Thank you all for joining us today. As many of you all know by now, the decision from the Trump administration to change the upcoming 2020 census will be conducted. So there will be a change. The U.S. Commerce Department announced just 2 nights ago that they will be including a citizenship question in the 2020 census. As you all know, Texas has one of the largest immigrant populations in the country, and because of that, Texas stands to lose big with the inclusion of a new citizenship question. If Texas is undercounted, the bottom line is that Texas loses. Our businesses lose, our families lose, our communities lose, and this really shouldn't be about politics. This is about getting Texas its fair share of representation and resources. As we all know, Texas is a very fast-growing state and with even faster-growing needs, and getting a full and accurate account shouldn't be a Democratic issue, and it shouldn't be a Republican issue. This is a Texas issue. So today, alongside with these advocates and partners, I'm calling on Governor Greg Abbott, as well as Attorney General Ken Paxton, to stand up for Texas and to join the lawsuit against the federal government to block the citizenship question on the census. Because there's too much at stake. Up to 3 new congressional district seats, representation and apportionment at every single level, and billions of dollars are at stake for Texas. And all Texans deserve to be counted, free from the fear that this question might rise for them and for their families. In recent years, Texas has received about $43.3 billion annually in census-guided federal funds. If Texas is undercounted, we lose out on our fair share of billions of dollars of future federal investment. With a citizenship question, once again, Texas loses. We're asking our governor and we're asking our attorney general to protect our state interests. And Texas has more to lose than most of these other states do that have already joined the lawsuit, who are fighting for their share as well. Our leaders need to recognize that, and we need to stand up for Texas' fair share. Texas deserves nothing less. Para los medios en español, la administración del presidente Donald Trump decidió cambiar el próximo censo del 2020. La Secretaría de Comercio anunció hace apenas 2 días que va a incluir una pregunta de ciudadanía en el próximo censo del 2020. Como sabemos, Texas tiene una de las poblaciones inmigrantes más grandes de nuestro país y por eso Texas tiene mucho que perder si se incluye la pregunta de ciudadanía. Si Texas tiene un contento equivocado y deja de contar a personas que ya viven aquí, Texas pierde. Nuestros negocios, comunidades y familias pierden. Esto no se trata de política, se trata de obtener lo que es justo en tema de...
Guys, live in the newsroom here, Molly. It's my understanding that we're going to be hearing from various lawmakers of states who may be influenced by this proposed question to put on the 2020 census. So right here, you're hearing from some of them from Texas, some of the Austin lawmakers. So we're going to listen in a little bit more to see what they had to say. This was just a few moments ago, playing this out for you to hear what their response is to this possible question on the next census, which is 2020. Now, the last time a citizenship question has been on it was 1950.
Esta pregunta de ciudadanía. Hay mucho en juego. Al menos 3 nuevos distritos del Congreso, representación y distribución de poder en todo nivel y billones de dólares están en juego. Todos los habitantes de Texas merecen ser tomados en cuenta y sin miedo ni temor por la seguridad de sus familias. En años recientes, Texas ha recibido más de 43 billones de dólares en fondos federales cada año. Si nuestro estado es contado por menos, perderemos nuestra parte justa sobre esos fondos federales. Cada sesión legislativa dependemos de esos fondos para cumplir con nuestras responsabilidades y balancear nuestro presupuesto estatal. Nos estamos haciendo daño a todos mismos si permitimos que estos fondos se vayan a otros estados. Por eso les pedimos hoy a nuestros líderes estatales que se opongan a esta pregunta y los habitantes de Texas no se merecen menos que esto y esperamos de nuestros líderes que luchen por lo que es justo aquí en el estado de Texas. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Vice Chair of the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, Mary Gonzalez from El Paso.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I would like to thank the Border Caucus and the allied organizations for allowing Malk to participate in this very important press conference. As Vice Chair of the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, our caucus is very concerned with the recent decision by Secretary Ross to add citizenship as a question on the census. The biggest loser? Texas. It jeopardizes Texans' hard-earned tax dollars that help pay for our neighborhood schools, provide critical health care services, prepare our communities during times of natural disasters, and upgrade roads and infrastructure. I think it's really important for us to hear those things again, because here at the legislature, all my colleagues talk about the same things over and over again. Taking care of our neighborhood schools, providing critical healthcare services to Texans, being prepared for natural disasters like Hurricane Harvey, and upgrading roads and infrastructures. So if we talk about this, every single time Republicans and Democrats are in this building and we have a really important decision made by Secretary Ross, like Chairman Blanco said, this is beyond politics. It's about policy. This is about hard-earned tax dollars. This is about making sure that Texans are safe and healthy and educated. The census was developed to provide key resources that are needed when they are needed most. Accurate census data is key to drawing down federal funding earned at the state and local level. The area that's going to be hit hardest is education, specifically at programs like Head Start that promote school readiness for young children under 5 years old. And Every Child Succeeds that serves the educational needs of children with disabilities, and the National School Lunch Program that ensures that children don't go hungry. We're putting our most vulnerable at risk when decisions like these are made that can continue to perpetuate anti-immigrant rhetoric. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, I know that our state budget depends on accurate information and federal dollars to maintain these programs. These are not minor dollars and cents, but billions to our state budget. Head Start alone received $623 million in federal funds in fiscal year 2017 and $635 in 2016. Yet politics and anti-immigrant rhetoric are putting critical programs and our children in danger. The Mexican American Legislative Caucus stands with the Border Caucus, the Senate Hispanic Caucus, NALEO, and other organizations to ensure across the nation to make sure that the census reflects the communities that it was meant to serve. We are disappointed that Governor Abbott and Attorney General Paxton joined in supporting and even requesting the harmful addition to the 2020 census that risks millions of dollars in federal funding. This is about the future of Texas. This is about the children of Texas. This decision will have an impact for decades to come, and it's important that every Texan pay attention to this decision, and every Texan really think critically about the impact of what this means. With that, I would like to pass it over again to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Appreciate it. At this time, I'd like to introduce Selena Moreno, representing MALDEF.
Thank you, Representative. Good morning. My name is Selena Moreno. I am the interim Southwest Regional Counsel of MALDEF, and I am here today to stand along with our allies in denouncing the recent decision. Over the years, presidential administrations of both parties have administered the census scientifically and moderately, refusing to politicize a sacred constitutional mandate that goes back to our nation's beginning. But this week, the Trump administration ended that tradition, opting instead to politicize the decennial enumeration of all persons by adding an unnecessary citizenship question in the clear hope of reducing the count of the Latinos, not only the nation's, but also this state's largest minority group. In response, we at MALDEF call for the immediate resignation of Wilbur Ross. His acquiescence in this political maneuver demonstrates his thorough incompetence to serve as Commerce Secretary. His actions have created a constitutional violation of unprecedented potential impact. Secondly, MALDEF calls on every member of Congress and also our state leaders to take immediate and effective action to prevent this politicization of the census and of the constitutional obligation to perform an actual enumeration of all persons living in the United States. The addition of this question will cost taxpayers even more and further strain an already underfunded census budget, because more money is going to have to be spent to go back and account for the many unreturned census forms. Thirdly, MALDEF will take the necessary legal steps to prevent this pernicious decision from taking effect on the 2020 census. California and some other states have already sued, more are planning to sue, and MALDEF will join appropriately in challenging the administration's latest depredation of our Constitution. Finally, although we know that this attack on the Latino community is harmful, it will most assuredly backfire on this administration. The Latino community will be counted both in the census and at the polls, and despite this administration's attempt to strike fear in the hearts of the American Latino population, citizens and non-citizens alike, we want to make clear that census data by law cannot be used for any other purpose. No one's going to come after you if you answer this question honestly, and if they do, MALDEF will stand with you and in the defense of our Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Selena. Appreciate it. I'd like to introduce Mr. Jose Carrillo, representing NALEO.
Thank you, Representative. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. My name is Jose Carrillo. I'm Director of Strategic Initiatives for the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials Educational Fund. We are an organization that's national. We aspire to make sure that Latinos are part of American democracy from citizenship to public service, and we're nonpartisan. And this census decision goes to the heart of our democracy in this country. And it's another assault on immigrants, Latinos, and the 2020 census. It's an attempt to undermine the census, undercount Latinos, and intimidate Latinos and immigrants. This census is mandated by not only Article 2 of the Constitution, but the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment says all persons are required to be enumerated in the census. So to add a question that has not been tested, to add a question that will intimidate, to add a question that will potentially cause an undercount, is counter to this constitutional mandate. We understand there's a lot of fear in the Latino community and immigrant communities, and we know that inclusion of this question may cause folks to not fill out their forms. There's no do-over. The census is only every 10 years, And the information that comes out of the census informs what's been mentioned already. It informs the distribution of resources, and it informs political power, not only at the federal level, but at the state level. The question has no merit. It's been noted that the Commerce Secretary and the Justice Department are noting that this information will be used to enforce the Voting Rights Act. This information is already being gathered by the American Community Survey, which is the sampling of the American population. It's done in that manner because the census is used every 10 years to count all people living in this country. So this information is already being collected. Also, the Census Bureau spends millions of dollars testing every question that's going to be used in the census. The addition of this question has not been tested. So the census would be going into the census blindly, not knowing what the repercussions are of adding this question. The citizenship question has not been actually included in the census for the last 70 years, and again, has been included in the American Community Survey, not the census. As has been referenced, this is also going to be a budget buster for the census. For every decrease in response, the Census Bureau estimates it will have to spend an additional $55 million to collect information from non-respondents. There are additional costs. Texas receives $43 billion in federal funds, as was mentioned before, for highways, CHIP, Medicaid, school lunch programs, Title I Ed grants, Head Start, and housing assistance. In 2010, as a result of that census, Texas gained 4 congressional seats, more than any other state in the country. The Election Data Service expects that if we were to have a clean 2020 census, Texas would actually gain 2 additional seats. So we're putting our representation at Congress at risk. Additionally, this information is used for redistricting purposes, as we really well know here in Texas. And so the data that's culled from the 2020 census will influence how folks are represented throughout the state and in Congress. There are 435 voting seats in Congress. We want to make sure that Texas maximizes those. Additionally, I want to just emphasize the growth of Texas. Just in the Austin MSA alone, 150 people move here every day. So those folks need resources, and government needs to provide those resources. Moving forward, it's not over yet. On April 1st, the Bureau will present these questions to Congress. The committees that have jurisdiction in the House are the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, chaired by Trey Crowdy and Ranking Member Elijah Cummings. In the Senate, it's Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, chaired by Ron Johnson and Ranking Member Claire McCaskill. We will make sure that these committees hear the voice of NALEO and other organizations. We are a membership organization as well. We have about over 1,200 NALEO members throughout the country at all levels of office, and we're going to encourage them and also our constituents of 6,000 elected officials to write members of Congress and let them know that this is the wrong decision. As was mentioned, California and New York have already filed lawsuits, and more expected. 19 state attorney generals are on record as opposing this in a letter dated February 12th to the Secretary. And then there's also a timing issue. This has to be resolved by May 2019 because that's when materials go to print. And if this is still a question, this will be impossible to fulfill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose. To talk a little bit about the impact on the state of Texas, we've got Ann Beeson from the CCCP.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chairman Blanco, for including us. I am Ann Beeson, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Public Policy Priorities. At CCCP, we use data to advocate for policy solutions that give Texans of all backgrounds the chance to reach their full potential. This question that was added to the census jeopardizes our ability to do that work. It jeopardizes the ability of our elected leaders, including the ones in this building, to develop and implement evidence-based public policies that help Texans. Policies about the allocation of dollars and many other policies, as have been mentioned. A census undercount in Texas endangers federal funding for education, for highways, for the school lunch program, for health care, and for other critical programs. And you've heard already this $43 billion number I want to just help you break that down a little bit and tell you a few of the programs and the dollars that would be at risk from an undercount, a census undercount. The SNAP program, $5.3 billion come to Texas to help address hunger, to help hungry children get the meals that they need. Highway planning and construction, $3.8 billion are at risk if this undercount, if this question jeopardizes the count. We know already, and it's been mentioned, that Texas, of course, is very large and growing and very diverse. And because of that, researchers have already been concerned about the undercount. There has been a traditional undercount in the past for children, for low-income people, for people of color, for immigrants, and this question makes that worse. And I want to make it clear that this jeopardizes programs and decisions that affect all Texans. Of course, a particularly negative impact on immigrants, but it will affect all of us to have an inaccurate representation of who is living in Texas, who our neighbors are. We are very glad to see bipartisan opposition to this undercount, and I think it's very important to emphasize this. This is not a political issue. It should not become a political issue. There are scientists and researchers around the country and former Census Bureau directors who worked under Republican administrations who have severely criticized the decision to add this question to the census. And we stand by them as public policy researchers ourselves who believe in fact-based data to inform our decisions. The constitutional purpose of the census is to count the entire population of this state. And we think it is absolutely critical that we do everything in our power to get this question back out of the census so that we can have an accurate count of who lives in the state of Texas. And we are privileged to stand with our partners up here to continue to raise awareness and to fight this question being added to the census. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. We also have representing Texas Organizing Project, Jessica Asua.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here today. Thank you, Representative Blanco, for inviting us to be a part of this very important press conference. My name is Jessica Asua, and I'm the immigration organizer at Texas Organizing Project. We organize Black and Latino communities in Dallas, Harris County, and San Antonio, Bexar County, with the goal of transforming Texas into a state where working people of color have the power and representation they deserve. I grew up and live in San Antonio, and I'm standing here right now because I have DACA. But not so long ago, I was undocumented. I know what it's like to live in the shadows, afraid of having your status known, of being deported and separated from your family. What the Trump administration is doing is sending shields down the spine of every immigrant in Texas and the country. This man has devoted so much energy to demonizing and marginalizing immigrants, and now he wants people to self-identify their immigration status. Every Texan should be concerned about what Trump is doing with the census and the implications it will have in our cities and our state. If people are afraid of answering the census for fear of being discovered, Texas will lose. We all lose. But the Trump administration has decided that it is okay if we lose resources and representation, as long as he can tell his white supremacist supporters that he made life miserable for immigrants. But I'm here to tell Trump that he's not going to win. I'm here to tell Trump that I'm not afraid of him or of his immigrant-hating supporters. My family and I will answer the census. We will stand up and be counted for our community, for our city, and for our state. But we will not answer the citizenship question. And I'm going to urge everyone who can hear my voice not to answer the citizenship question. We're going to show Trump that we're not to be played with, that we will not be bullied, that we are united in our resistance. Texans, don't give in to Trump's hate. Stand up, be counted, be unafraid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Again, once again, we want our governor and our Attorney General to stand up for Texas, to make sure that Texas gets its fair share. I want to thank our partners today that joined us to provide great information, and at this time we'll open it up for questions.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the constitutional implications of this question?
Yes, and I'll defer to Selena from MALDEF to give a little bit of background on the legal side of it, the constitutional side of it.
Sure. So in the United States Constitution, there's an enumeration clause which requires the count of all persons, not just all citizens. That has been in place since the founding of our country. And the implications here, I think that there's an aspect of intentional discrimination. The Trump administration knows that this will lead to an undercount and in violation directly of that enumeration clause.
But this question was in the census before. Can you give a little history of what implications you'd like to say?
Sure. So the last time that this question has been included in the full census for every household was in 1950. Things were very different back then. In 1950, the Civil Rights Act had not yet been passed. Latinos had not been incorporated into the Voting Rights Act that was passed in 1964. And so I think the country looks very different, and the interpretation of the Constitution also looks very different than it did back in 1950.
And just to remind you that there's been a variety since then of both Democratic and Republican administrations where they had appointees to the census that agreed that the citizenship question should not be included. So I think that's an important point to make in terms of the political aspect of it. Yes, sir.
Are you guys worried more about the fear of people not answering these questionnaires, or the administration possibly taking action for those who do answer?
Well, Texas is unique because we passed this last legislative session SB 4, so the fear is a real thing. We're concerned that, as it is, Texas Latino children are undercounted dramatically in Texas compared to other states in the country. Our concern is that with 17% of the Texas population being immigrant population, a lot of folks aren't going to answer the door. They're not going to be counted because of the fear, because of the concern about SB 4. And there's just a general lack of trust of the government. So our concern is that those folks are not going to be counted, which will impact our budget, which will impact the resources, our apportionment, and our representation in Congress.
But even without that question, that fear doesn't dissipate.
It does not, and unfortunately our state has gone down that path. So regardless of what government entity or agency approaches an immigrant or a family of immigrants, that fear is real and is there.
It doesn't dissipate. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, jump in.
It doesn't dissipate the fear, but I think it continues to perpetuate the fear that is currently existing, right? So it heightens the fear. And so like my colleague said, to answer your question, I think we can be concerned on both fronts, right? I think as policymakers, our responsibility is to make sure that Texans have access to good schools, medical health care programs, roads, et cetera. So from a policy standpoint, we're concerned people aren't going to answer the census. From a just state leader standpoint, beyond of like politics and even policy, we're concerned that people are scared, and this just continues to perpetuate that fear. And we can't live in a state like that where people are scared of government, right? They should be able to trust and turn to government in times of need, and that may not happen.
Instead of talking about the fear, have these organizations looked at this as an opportunity to get your voice out and reach? Are you planning any type of outreach campaign in the communities of saying, hey, this is coming, you're not required to answer this one question. All you have to really answer is about regards to your household, and then use this as a positive instead of standing here talking about fear.
Yeah, I mean, as grassroots organization, we're gonna be doing our best to inform people that, I mean, it's very important that everyone knows that we need to be counted for, because this is going to impact our cities and our counties. So we want to inform people that we want to make sure that they know that we are here, but we don't have to answer that immigration status question. That's very important that people need to know, and we want to make sure that people know about it.
Does MALDEF do anything with that? No. A lot of times we here that cover the legislature, we see the caucuses come out and talking about how terrible things are, but we don't hear anything proactive. What's being done proactive to move away from the fear and let's get counted?
So every census, MALDEF hires additional staff to do just that, to make sure we go out in the community and encourage everyone to be counted. In addition, because this is unprecedented and we believe it's a constitutional violation, we are weighing our legal options and talking with others who have already filed suit, including the state of California.
From Naleo's point of view, you're right. The people who, the pressure, the political pressure to include this question in the census, we need to let folks know that's an effort for folks not to be counted. That's something, they don't want you to be counted. They don't want you to fill out the census form. The best way to fight this is to actually fill out the form and send it in. And we don't know what the repercussions are going to be whether someone fills out the yes or no question on citizenship, because it hasn't been tested. We don't know what the scientific evidence is of how people are going to react. But we are telling folks, you know, in order to combat this, you make yourself counted. Thanks.
I just want to make 2 points. One is that we need to remember that it is actually the job and the role of the U.S. Census Bureau to ensure that everyone is counted. And the reason that we are so concerned is that, you know, we now have an administration that's telling that bureau not to do its job the right way. So it is fundamentally and foremost their job to ensure that everyone gets counted. It should not have to be the job of other nonprofit organizations to do that. But unfortunately, we are having to step in. We have always stepped in. And we will continue to explain why it is so important for people to fill out the census. But what we don't want is, you know, an administration that is actually thwarting the very role, the reason why we created, the reason why the Constitution itself says that we should count everyone in this country. The other point I want to make, which I believe hasn't been made yet, that's very important, is that this addition to the question will negatively affect businesses in Texas and around the country. Businesses routinely rely on census data to make decisions about where they open up stores, where they, you know, many different business decisions. And that is why we do see business leaders around the country also coming out and saying, this is going to affect us. You need to really think of it as a fundamental research question that drives decisions, you know, beyond your imagining. Pretty much every, you know, decision that a business and elected leader makes, if it's an evidence-based decision, at some point is going to need to rely on basic census data that is now at jeopardy of being inaccurate because of the addition of this question.
Representative Blanco, what do you say to proponents of this who say that all states require citizenship to vote, so representation shouldn't be a factor here?
Well, that's, I think, one of the arguments that the Department of Justice made when they sent their letter originally to the Census Bureau. I would say that it's in our Constitution and just spelled it out for us. We've got to count everyone here, regardless of citizenship or not. I think it impacts our daily lives, our schools, our funding, and our representation at the federal level. So it's the responsibility for Congress and this administration to uphold the Constitution, and I think we're deviating from it.
But Representative, couldn't that create a false information if you don't? If you have a raw number of those people and you're drawing congressional districts based on that raw number and not knowing who those people are, isn't that a fallacy in itself when you're maybe basing on individuals who can't vote in a local or even a congressional?
Guys, let's switch it up briefly, actually, and come back into the newsroom. I want to switch it over to a live feed that we have coming in from the National Press Club. This is downtown Washington, D.C., where the NAACP is actually holding their own meeting, their own news conference here on the same topic, the 2020 census, and the question as to what that recent announcement will do for the community, for the African American community at large as well. They're going to be making their own remarks on this. This is their own press conference to kind of discuss this question. And it's coming in live versus taped video, which we have of the Austin lawmakers. So we can go back to some of that in a little bit if we need to. But that was basically the crux of it. You saw most of it there, how Austin will be affected as a Texas community that has so many immigrants. That was their sort of comment on it. Let's go over to the National Press Club right here in downtown DC, guys. Live, here's the NAACP.
This lawsuit is the result of a collaboration between the NAACP and the Rule of Law Clinic at Yale Law School, which is headed by Professor Michael Wishney. As the NAACP began to prepare its training programs for the 2020 census, we began a partnership with Yale Law School focusing on threats to our democracy. We agreed that census undercounts in communities of color warranted close study and attention, and we wound up filing a Freedom of Information Act request with the Commerce Department seeking records regarding preparations for the census. As we continue to look at past undercounts and the Census Bureau's preparations for 2020, we came to the conclusion that we were witnessing a train wreck in the making. The numerous problems and complexities confronting past census takers are compounded by the current administration's neglect of the Census Bureau and its apparent disregard for whether the 2020 count in communities of color is anything approaching accurate. We therefore concluded that legal action was necessary and appropriate. We are proud to be joined in this effort by Prince George's County, Maryland, the only majority African American county in the state of Maryland, by the Prince George's County branch of the NAACP, and by Mr. Robert Ross and Ms. Elizabeth Johnson, both of whom are longtime residents of Prince George's County. We are also pleased to be joined by the nationally renowned law firm of Jenner & Block, which will be serving as counsel for the plaintiffs in this case, along with the Rule of Law Clinic and the NAACP Office of General Counsel. From a legal standpoint, the NAACP believes that the question in this case boils down to whether the constitutional requirement to conduct an actual enumeration of the U.S. population is satisfied by a census that predictably and substantially undercounts communities of color, while predictably and substantially overcounting groups that are less diverse. How badly can the Census Bureau undercount communities of color while still satisfying constitutional requirements? We believe that there are constitutional limits on how badly and how disproportionately badly the government can conduct the count. And so today, we have filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland, seeking a declaration from the court that the Census Bureau's plans and preparations for the 2020 census are insufficient to satisfy constitutional requirements. We are also seeking injunctive relief, requiring the government to take the steps necessary to conduct a fair and accurate census. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit are the NAACP, the Prince George's County branch of the NAACP, Prince George's County, Mr. Robert Ross, and Ms. Elizabeth Johnson. The defendants in the case are President Trump in his official capacity, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in his official capacity, the acting director of the Census Bureau in his official capacity, the Census Bureau itself, and the United States. Next, we're going to have 4 speakers provide brief remarks, after which we will open things up for questions. And as our first speaker, I am proud to introduce the President and Chief Executive Officer of the NAACP, Mr. Derek Johnson.
I want to
thank Brad Berry and the Office of the General Counsel of the NAACP, Prince George County, the Yale Legal Clinic, and all of our partners in this endeavor. The basic mission of the NAACP is to make democracy work. It is not stated there plainly, but that's the role of the NAACP. And when you understand how democracy works, the census count is in the center of that reality. An accurate count will provide the necessary resources for municipalities, counties, and states to properly function through the allocation of federal funds. An accurate census count also determines this little known thing that takes place right after the census count is called redistricting. To ensure political boundaries are drawn in a way in which representation is fair and equal. But more importantly, an accurate census count allows for this nation to truly reflect in its demography the representation of all communities across the country. We know as NAACP that the undercount in African American and Latino communities has been a persistent problem across the country. In fact, as a result of undercounts in communities, we've seen majority African American governance underfunded substantially because the impact of the census would last for 10 years. And as a result of that, we are embarking on an effort as a part of our overall strategic plan to ensure democracy work through the civic engagement calendar over the next 5 years. This year's midterm election to ensure that individuals fully engage and participate. The census count to make sure there's a fair count and representation of all communities. To ensure that the redistricting process is one in which represent all communities' ability to select candidates of their choice back to midterm and presidential elections. This is an important juncture for this democracy. This next 5 years, but most important, this effort to ensure not only Prince George County is fairly represented, but all jurisdictions are fairly represented, whether they are made up of majority African American communities, Latino communities, or white communities. In a democracy, our voices matter. In a democracy, fair and accurate data is important, but also in a democracy, when communities are injured and aggrieved, we seek the remedies at hand. In this case, we are filing this lawsuit. So I want to commend Prince George County, the Prince George NAACP, for working with us and standing up to ensure democracy work for all. Thank you.
Thank you, President Johnson. And as his comments reflect, this is a national issue having local impacts. And so the presence of Prince George's County in this lawsuit illustrates the effect that the undercount can have on communities across the country that have substantial communities of color. All right, for our next speaker, I am pleased to introduce the County Executive for Prince George's County, Maryland, the Honorable Rashern L. Baker.
First of all, let me say this. We are pleased in Prince George's County to be standing here with the National NAACP, with our local branch of the NAACP, with Yale Law School and with the law firm of Jenner and Block in this important issue. It's ironic because Prince George's County is where the home of the Census Bureau is. And just think about our story. We're a county that went from majority white to majority black. We're one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, African American county in the United States. And yet we are woefully undercounted. And as the president of the NAACP has said, that means loss of federal funds, loss of opportunities, but also it hurts us when reapportionment comes about, when we're drawing the lines for congressional districts. And so I am proud that the county stands here, not just representing itself, but as an example of the undercounting that is going on across this nation in places of color. You know, I served past president of the County Executives of America. And in that organization, which represents the large counties and counties throughout the United States, we're always worried about federal funds and whether, in fact, in this great democracy of ours, our voices will be heard. There is nothing more important than making sure that the census gets it right. And there's nothing more disturbing to us in the county with the thought that at this time when we really need to make sure our democracy works, that the present administration, the Trump administration, would not only make sure that not only doesn't have somebody in charge of the Census Bureau, but are actually changing the ways that we're going to go about getting information. Folks will not be knocking on your doors to make sure we're counted. Places that we know have been undercounted for years would not be targeted. So we see this as an opportunity for us to stop that from happening. We're not going to wait until it actually happens. The preparation for making sure that the census takes place appropriately is right now, not in 2020. And if we're not preparing today, then we're preparing to fail. And that's not an option for this nation. It's certainly not an option for the state of Maryland, and it's not an option for Prince George's County. So we're pleased to stand here and to do everything that we can to make sure that this lawsuit goes forward and not stop them from doing something at the Census Bureau, but propels them to do the things they need to do to make sure that we're adequately counted. So we're proud to stand here with you. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive Baker. I'm now pleased to introduce the president of the Prince George's County branch of the NAACP, Mr. Robert Ross.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Ross. I'm president of the Prince George's County NAACP. I'm named as one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit as well as the branch. I have lived in Prince George's County since 2001 and consider myself a long-time resident of the county. Most of what's been said, I totally agree with. When we start out, democracy works. And if we don't have everybody involved in the process, then we don't have democracy. So we hope this lawsuit will move forward and that we are successful in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ross. One of the things that we point out in our lawsuit and in some of our briefing materials is that not only is Prince George's County, did Prince George's County have the highest undercount of any county in the state of Maryland in the 2010 census, but the jurisdiction with the second highest undercount in the state of Maryland was Baltimore City. So you start to see how race and ethnicity is impacting the count and how the undercount hurts communities all over the state and all over the country. Our next speaker, I'm pleased to introduce, and I'm proud to introduce, because she is a student at the Yale Law School, a participant in the Rule of Law Clinic, and one of the young people who have been doing most of the heavy lifting in this case, and doing it gladly. And it's also with a note of pride because I'm an alum of Yale Law School, so I love it when Yale Law grads are showing off. Our next speaker is Ms. Charlotte Swartz.
Thank you so much, Mr. Berry. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution requires the government to conduct an actual enumeration of the people every 10 years. But the government's preparations for the 2020 census are so extraordinarily deficient that they are in violation of its constitutional duty. There has been no leadership of the Census Bureau for almost a year. The government has failed to protect the first ever digital census from Russian and other cybersecurity threats. And the Census Bureau has drastically reduced its footprint in the field, especially dangerous in the face of elevated public distrust in government. The government knows that these deficiencies disproportionately impact people of color who are already vulnerable to being undercounted. An undercounted community is an undervalued community. When the government fails to accurately count people of color, their votes are diluted and their communities are deprived of critical federal funds. We cannot afford to let the government's neglect of its constitutional duty continue any longer. It is for this reason that the NAACP Prince George's County, the NAACP Prince George's County branch, Mr. Ross and Ms. Johnson, filed this lawsuit today to compel the government to conduct an actual enumeration of all the people. Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we were going to open the floor up to questions if any of the journalists here have questions. Yes, sir.
Well, the undercount has impacted us by loss of federal dollars to start with. I think we calculated somewhere around $200 million over the loss of money from the undercount in the Census Bureau, the census. But the other way is making sure representation. I mean, we're about to go into a reapportionment for congressional districts, and we want to make sure in the county and in the state, because as was said, it's not just Prince George's County. It's Baltimore and the state of Maryland that's undercounted. But we stand also as a representation of what's happening throughout the United States. So if it's happening in one of the wealthiest communities of color in the United States, imagine where it's happening when those communities are challenged. And so we stand here as an example of what we need to do across the country.
Question for Ms. Ross. You're filing on behalf of the Prince George's NAACP. Why are you filing also as a resident of yourself?
Because you have to have residents involved in the process. We selected Elizabeth Johnson as a resident. She's been living in the county all her life. But it is important that residents get involved in the process. If we don't have residents involved, because she has been impacted by undercounting. Each one of everybody that lives in Prince George County has been impacted. Loss of revenue funds, but we're not aware of that. That's why it's so important that we get involved with the individual and as well as the branch.
General question about the question that is going to appear on the census now regarding citizenship. Does that play a role at all in your concerns?
Absolutely. This lawsuit was conceived prior to that issue emerging. However, that will have a chilling effect on individuals filling out the form. So we are concerned about that. For us, in a historical context, there was a debate in Congress dealing with slavery. And it was settled by saying that we will count slaves as 3/5 a person for the purpose of census. The census is a fundamental building block in democracy. And anytime you undercount a population, it reverts back to the historical argument about 3/5 of a person. Putting that question on the form also demean the opportunity of other communities to be fully represented out of the fear that if they fill it out for someone in their household who's not a citizen, that the government will come and raid their homes. It's a chilling effect. In this country, we should have grown beyond that to ensure that all populations are represented and to make sure local governing bodies have the resources necessary to maintain our roads, our bridges, and provide a quality education for our children.
I can just add to that. I think it's important because we see this in Prince George's County, and that is it has a chilling effect when you put that on there of people who are unsure about their immigration status or unsure, given the rhetoric that's going on the national level, whether in fact they should participate in the census. And they are exactly the people that we want to be counted. They are the undercounted folks we've seen before. And so when we see whether it's a growing Latino population or folks from Africa, other places who are unsure, and given the rhetoric, that's the chilling effect that it has. And I think that's the chilling effect it was meant to have by the Trump administration.
And Mr. Baker, in your jurisdiction, how much of a factor is that? I know in Montgomery County, for example, I think the upwards of 1/3 people can trace their roots to foreign-born.
For us, our fastest growing population, our Latino population, and so you can imagine, we really want to make sure that we get the count right. And with the rhetoric going on now in the nation, and with this coming on, I think it will have a chilling effect just in those places that are undercounted right now. And we can look inside the areas of Prince George's County, you can see where they're undercounted. It also will have a chilling effect in Baltimore City, which also has a growing Latino population, and having this would have that chilling effect there also.
As President Johnson said, our lawsuit has been months in the making. The citizenship question is a very important issue. It has already received lots of attention. There have already been lawsuits filed that are speaking directly to the citizenship question. There will be more lawsuits filed that are devoting attention to that issue. But there are many, many other issues that affect the undercount. And so our lawsuit is focusing on all the other factors, the underfunding, understaffing, misplaced priorities, all of those things. That's what we're challenging in our lawsuit. Other questions?
Yes, sir. You know, on Capitol Hill, there has also been concern about the preparation and the funding. But as part of the spending bill last week, they provided a lot more funding, more than $1 billion, in addition to what the president had requested. Could you talk a little bit about why you considered that inadequate and whether you did consider that in your lawsuit?
Proposing the bill and passing the bill are two different things. And once the final bill passes, we would like to evaluate it to see if it's sufficient. And so although that bill passed, the question is it sufficient? We've gone through the last 30 years of undercounts. The technology is far more advanced than it's ever been. And so there's no reason for us to continue to have undercounts when both the skill is there, the technology, now we simply need the political will to make sure we have an accurate count for this census round.
Thank you for that question. The question is whether a congressional appropriation amounts to an actual enumeration. What the Constitution requires is an accurate count. The fact that Congress has appropriated more funding than the Trump administration sought for one fiscal year does not mean that the Census Bureau and the government thereby meet their constitutional obligation to conduct an actual enumeration. What is the Census Bureau going to do with the money? Are they going to continue to focus on the digital side of things? Or are they going to reverse their plans to gut community partnerships, community offices, door-to-door canvassers, and the like, methods that have been shown to be effective in getting communities of color to participate in the census? So, you know, it's a good first step, but there's a lot more that needs to be done, and through this lawsuit, we're seeking to have that done. Other questions?
Ms. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to know, could you give your general thoughts on why you feel this lawsuit is important for you to be a part of?
I want to make sure I stay in my lane as a homeowner. And you've heard from these august gentlemen here talking about the effect of the undercounted census. But as a resident of Prince George's County, I worry. I've been in the county since 1974. I have seen the difference in a lot of things. And so I'm hoping that as a part of this lawsuit, that all of these things that I look at and become disenchanted with, that they will be alleviated.
Excuse me, ma'am, can you discuss some of those things in detail?
No, because I'm going to let them discuss them. I told you I got to stay in my lane. I'm not a politician. I'm the housing chair. And so then I'm going to let them answer all of those questions.
But I think
though I have thoughts.
But I think she's asking about the impact on you, the individual.
Yeah, when you guys ask the question, announce the media outlet that you're with.
I'm sorry, I'm Becky. I'm with ABC News.
I'm glad to see.
Now, what is how it's impacted you individually as an individual homeowner?
As an individual homeowner, it's impacted me because I travel over the roads. I travel over the bridges. I have seen the struggle of our county executive to try to get things done that affect me as a person who uses the facilities of the county. So those are the kinds of things that, as I said, that disenchant me, because when the storms come and my road doesn't get cleaned as quickly as it should be, and when my electricity goes out because the transformer has blown, then I get a little bit, what is going on? But I realize also, with my little bit of political knowledge, I know the efforts that our leaders are making to change those things. But it's all about money. We all know that. So if you don't have the money, you can't make the changes. You can't do the things that need to be done. Shirley, go ahead.
Sorry, just...
Geez, I feel like I'm the...
Do you think maybe the issue is maybe the community isn't knowledgeable about how important census is and how it can affect them?
I'm sure a lot of people don't know. There's a lot of things that people don't know because they're too busy trying to make it from day to day and make a living. So then when you get to the things that appear in the congressional record, when you hear things that are not salacious that the administration is doing, people don't know those things. They don't pick up the newspaper many times or go on their seat on their phone and look and read the news. So there's a lot of people that need to be informed, but it takes money to even inform people. You need to have community meetings, you got to rent halls, you have to do things, and you have to hire people who are going to reach people. So that becomes an expense in and of itself. I don't know if that's responsive, but that's... Take that.
Okay. Next question. Any further questions? Any further questions? All right.
I have one question.
Yes.
Benjamin Chase, National Newspaper Publishers Association. With this step that Prince George County is taking in NAACP, will other counties have an opportunity to join in with you across the United States? Is there provision for New York and Tribal Reach? What is the provision for other counties to join this lawsuit?
Well, we have already been approached by organizations that want to support us in this lawsuit, and the only question is how. Perhaps people will move to intervene in the lawsuit and become plaintiffs in the lawsuit, along with the NAACP and Prince George's County and the individual plaintiffs. Perhaps they will wait until the briefing stage and file amicus curiae briefs. That's a possibility as well. But it's a multi-pronged effort. Also, there are folks who will not participate in the lawsuit, but will engage in advocacy on the Hill that is making the same points and making the same arguments that we're making in our lawsuit. So we encourage organizations of mayors, state attorneys general, to support us in this effort, and we believe they will.
In addition to what Brad mentioned, I've already had outreach from a governor who's interested in this process and will possibly be joining the suit. We've had outreaches from several mayors from across the country, along with other individuals that represent jurisdictions. This is a national case. Prince George's County is the perfect example to show when you have a high wealth county, majority African American, where the headquarters of the Census Bureau exists, and yet they are still undercounted, it shows you the magnitude of the problem. Can you imagine a rural county in Alabama, a low wealth municipality in Mississippi, or even the city of Detroit, what is taking place? This is a persistent problem that we've seen census count after census count. And now we're standing here and say, at this juncture, we no longer will be 3/5 of the person. We want to make sure there's an accurate count so that our kids are provided for, our elderly needs are met, and we can be a healthy society.
I mean, one of the things that certainly we want to do from the standpoint of my association with the County Executives of America and as a board member for the National Association for Counties is to make sure, as the president of NAACP just said, that they are aware that this is so important. Because if it can happen here right next to the nation's capital with the Census Bureau located there, then certainly, across the nation, we have problems. And so we're going to work with them to make sure that they're part of this, that they're advocating, and that we do it in time enough to get it corrected before they actually, the count is done. Thank you.
Just wanted to point out one thing in response to the question that came from the rear. Every census cycle, NAACP units across the country engage in education and training in their communities with regard to the census to get the word out. But ultimately, the obligation to conduct a fair and accurate census falls to the federal government. Okay? So I think there is a temptation or a tendency in some instances to blame the resident, to blame the victim. In fact, the government has to figure this out. This is one of the few affirmative obligations that our Constitution imposes on the federal government, and they have to get the job done. Any other questions? If not, I want to thank all of you for coming, and we look forward to your reporting.
You want to do your things outside? Yeah, I'm going to do outside.
Really interesting, guys. So that was a live look inside the National Press Club in downtown DC. The NAACP suing the government along with Prince George's County executive is there, Rashawn Baker, and others to talk about this census question in 2020 and how it's going to affect their community. They're saying it's going to be discriminatory. Let me know if you agree. What do you guys think about this? I know it's been quite the talker for a couple of days. I know we're going to be talking about it for many months and even years to come because we're not even there yet, a couple years away. Quick check-in on the DC Eagles, guys. This is Anacostia live look at the Eagle Cam. Liberty and Justice, they are taking care of their 2 little eaglet babies in their nest. We'll have more view of that. You can see the Anacostia River in the background. Quite the clear day on today, this Wednesday. Let's go over to some of the top stories, some of the top talkers of the day, including this Facebook data breach. We've been listening to that for the past couple of days. People are starting to search on Facebook to find out what data has been collected on them. In fact, I still have yet to do it. I'm going to be looking that up after this stream. But one of these stories is on that and sort of how you can look into that to protect yourself, some of the changes in their privacy settings, and also some other stuff coming out of Hollywood and other just sort of social talkers of the day. So check out some of the top stories.
Topping your talkers today, after nearly a decade, Britney Spears may be close to being in charge of her own money. Her dad and lawyer have been handling things since 2008. Those were the judge's orders, following her very public breakdown and subsequent psychiatric evaluation. A source tells Us Weekly Britney's dad is now consulting with her medical team. Timing is up in the air. She's kicking off a tour this summer. In other news, no longer will customers peruse Cosmo at 5,000 Walmart checkout counters. Instead, the mag will be, quote, isolated on magazine racks. USA Today reports the National Center on Sexual Exploitation pushed the change, the organization calling Cosmo graphic with often degrading and offensive material, also highlighting the decision comes amid the Me Too movement. No comments so far from Cosmo. And Sean Penn trending. For a bizarre late show interview, smoking a cigarette and admitting to host Stephen Colbert, he was still feeling effects of Ambien he took on the red eye the night before. From calling it awkward to just mere confusion, those at home had plenty to say. In New York, Ashley Dvorkin, Fox News.
So you made this beer?
I did.
The latest beer to be brewed at New Belgium is called Hemperor HPA. It was created using shelled hemp seeds.
You know, living in Colorado, our brewers are inspired by a lot of things around us, and obviously we have a robust hemp culture here in the state.
Given the federal government's views on hemp, it wasn't an easy process. It took about 3 years to produce. In fact, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's just say this brew was a whole new hurdle.
Our brewers are telling me it was about a 15 on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as difficulty goes.
Out of curiosity, if this took 3 years to be able to create, what does an average beer take lengthwise to produce?
Generally about 6 to 8 months.
New Belgium says it became clear right away the government was not going to allow them to brew a beer with the flower or leaf of the plant. So instead, they used hemp seeds brewed with other replicated ingredients and created something unique.
No THC, no CBD, no psychoactive ingredient whatsoever in there. Really, the big thing is right when you pour the glass, you know, just that giant whiff of that, beautiful hemp flower coming off of there. So.
The beer has everything from a citrusy, tropical taste to hints of dank resin.
That's really good.
Thank you, thank you.
Given the difficult regulatory process and the challenges New Belgium faced, it now plans to advocate on behalf of hemp.
So throughout the coming year, we're going to be working to help modernize hemp laws through a campaign we're doing with a group called Hemp for Victory.
For every barrel sold, they'll donate $1 to that group. Hemperor HPA will be available on draft starting April 2nd.
They've nailed it. Essentially, it's the beer we wanted to make.
In Fort Collins, this is Kevin Torres, Fox 31.
Facebook still under fire following the disclosure that data from some 50 million users made it into the hands of Cambridge Analytica, a political consulting group linked to the Trump campaign. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg says he's agreed to testify before Congress about the controversy, and on Wednesday, Facebook rolled out a new system for users to control their privacy and security settings.
They were told that they had to have what is known in the legal trade as informed consent. They had to make it really obvious, and they did not do that.
The system will be introduced gradually over the coming weeks. It doesn't change Facebook's privacy policy, but it does allow people to change their settings from one place, rather than going through 20 separate sections across the platform. The announcement comes a day after a Cambridge Analytica whistleblower accused Facebook of developing the technology to listen to your conversations even when you're not using the app.
They don't care whether or not what they do is legal as long as it gets the job done.
The company is now facing multiple lawsuits in state and federal courts over its data mining policy. And if they don't come up with a credible defense, the penalties could start adding up.
That could run into billions of dollars if they lose all of these.
It's still not clear when Zuckerberg will testify before Congress, but the House Energy and Commerce Committee says it plans to hold a hearing in the coming weeks. In Los Angeles, Jonathan Hunt, Fox News.
These sketches from federal court show the man the FBI says sent 11 packages with homemade explosives to government offices in the D.C. area Monday. The FBI says 43-year-old Than Kong Fan of Everett, Washington, put the packages in the mail. They had homemade explosives and ramblings about terrorism and mind control. The packages were addressed to government agencies including the White House, CIA, and the FBI headquarters. The packages turned up yesterday at 5 facilities, many military bases that process mail for the agencies the FBI says Fan targeted. According to court documents, a postal inspector traced one of the packages sent to the FBI to a post office in Washington state. The post office had surveillance video of Fan mailing the package from a self-service kiosk. None of the packages received at the bases exploded, and no one was injured. But the court documents say the packages could have caused significant injury to anyone who was around if they exploded. Fan was known to the FBI, having sent hundreds of rambling letters and emails to U.S. government offices over the years. FBI agents, along with local deputies, arrested him Monday night.
A warning to nearly 10,000 Texans. People around Galveston County are told to get tested immediately. Why? If they were a patient at Coastal Health and Wellness in the last few years, they might have hepatitis B, or hepatitis C, or even HIV.
Patient safety and employee safety are our utmost importance to us.
Coastal admits poor sterilization methods may have exposed patients to any number of diseases. More specifically, anyone who had dental work or invasive medical procedures. Officials say Coastal is cooperating but will still face consequences.
Center was cited for 11 immediate threat to life violations, all of which centered around the cleaning and sterilization of dental instruments and instruments used for minor surgery.
The at-risk period stretches all the way back to March of 2015. Locals are furious and confused.
Where you got your teeth fixed at, it's a possibility that you might have AIDS.
It's really criminal. Someone should be held responsible for this.
The clinic stopped many procedures weeks ago, but never said why, and only recently started alerting patients. Texans say the delay alone is reason to be mad. One nursing student who may have been exposed doesn't think Coastal understands the severity of the situation.
They don't do what they're supposed to do, and it can affect everybody. I mean, people's lives, like, it's terrible.
Coastal Health and Wellness is offering free screenings through April for anyone who may have been exposed. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
President Trump has been cracking down on both illegal and legal immigration, as he said he would during the campaign. But along the southern border, for most immigrant workers, the daily commute from Mexico to California farms is the same as it was before Trump became president. Thousands of Mexicans cross the border every day to pick lettuce, carrots, broccoli, and other vegetables that make California America's salad bowl.
For us, there isn't really any noticeable change. We just come here to work. We don't get involved in politics.
The majority of workers are holders of border crossing cards, which do not include work authorization, but many break the rules, and the immigration crackdown hasn't had much of a practical impact. Border barriers extend the same 654 miles they did under President Obama. And Border Patrol staffing fell last year. Many local business owners now say they're waiting for the reality to match the rhetoric.
There's a lot of things that contribute to the shrinking local domestic workforce. The biggest factor is that we haven't had meaningful immigration reform.
But others say they need that labor to survive, and they're already seeing fewer workers now than in past years, forcing them to rely on short-term employees.
So the American public is end up paying more for food because we don't have the labor to harvest it.
The recently passed spending bill allocates $1.6 billion for the border wall. It's still not clear if there's a plan to make Mexico pay for the rest. In Los Angeles, Anita Vogel, Fox News.
People angry about the Stephon Clark shooting, taking their frustrations to the Sacramento City Council. Fired up locals packed an open meeting Tuesday night. There was yelling, screaming, and many calls for quiet. Eventually, the forum got underway. Many black residents pleaded for assurances they won't be killed in the city they call home.
We want you to return to true meaning of public safety because we don't feel very safe right now.
Many speakers asked simply, why was the 22-year-old killed? Others wanted to know why any unarmed black person is killed.
Every time I see the unarmed black man news headline, I never even have to finish reading because they all end the same: shot dead by police.
It happened on March 18th. Police were responding to reports of someone breaking car windows. They saw Clark in a backyard and thought he was holding a gun. Officers fired shot after shot, killing the young father. That gun turned out to be a cell phone.
Just letting you guys know, this is not a gun, it's a phone.
After the council meeting, protesters moved to the Golden One Center, blocking entrances to the arena. Officials were forced to delay the start of the Kings-Mavericks game. The Attorney General announced it will oversee the investigation to ensure fairness and transparency. But many people say that's not enough. They want criminal charges filed against the officers now. In Los Angeles, Robert Gray, Fox News.
And guys, just a quick update on the suspicious package story, the string of packages that we've been following. There was, unfortunately, another one found in a government mail facility this morning. It is believed to be sent by the same man that you saw in that one piece there today that we just played, who was arrested in connection with all of those other sending of the packages. So just a little update with that. We've been following that. It's also updated on our website and on our Facebook page as well. But good to know it's not sort of, they don't think it's a separate source, and that has sort of been alleviated as long as there aren't more packages out there. So just a kind of a hectic day for DC police and government agencies and stuff looking into this possibility that more suspicious packages are out there, including at this government mail facility. All right, we'll take you back, guys, to the live Eagle Cam, show you this just for a little bit as we look for more video and more breaking stuff to bring to you on our daily live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, guys, talk about a soothing way to end our digital live stream today as we come up on 2 o'clock Eastern. Mama Eagle Liberty just tearing apart her fish from the Anacostia River to feed the 2 baby eaglets there in the nest. This is in southeast DC, overlooking the Anacostia River. As you can see, sort of when you get that sort of wide angle, you can see more of DC in that shot. But this is a pretty cool close-up. I don't think I've been this mesmerized with this camera until today, and this close-up view on the feeding. But we're going to have more of this to come. Unfortunately, no other really breaking stories or video coming out of our network sources or other sister stations as well, but we're able to bring you some of that information on the census earlier today, and then of course the vice president in Minneapolis who spoke, and some various social talkers and topical issues of the day, some of the videos that have been trending, stories of course about Facebook and other things of the like that we were able to show you from some of our sister stations, some stories out of Hollywood and New York. But we'll leave it here, guys, let you kind of watch the end of this because it's very mesmerizing to watch, I will admit. So if you're on with us, thanks for hanging out with us. Feel free to join us on our stream daily here on our YouTube channel, and we'll catch you again tomorrow. Enjoy this last sort of few moments here. We'll leave this video running for the duration of our stream. Catch you tomorrow.